Hi everyone, my name is Liz and I'm an alcoholic and I have been sober for 3 years, coming up in just about 2 days. And it's been quite a wild ride. Just to give you a little bit of my backstory, I grew up in a home where it wasn't always rainbows and daffodils, but it also wasn't explicitly horrible. Everything that ever happened to me was behind closed doors and with curtains shut on the windows. And when I say that, it's just you wouldn't know from the outside what kind of abuse was happening because it was all really psychological. And so I grew up with my mom and dad needing my mom wanting a divorce when I was like 10 years old. And my dad saying no, and them just never getting a divorce, but living miserably together. They split up within our household. So there was literally my mom was the person upstairs and my dad was the person downstairs. And at night, I always had to decide which parent to spend the night with. I would usually eat 2 dinners when I was young. So I was growing up getting pretty heavy. I was pretty chunky for a long time. Not sleeping well because I would try to stay up for my mom to come home from work, and she would take the last train home from the city and show up at our house at around midnight, and I'd be waiting for her. I also relied on her to be able to do homework because when I was 7 years old, I couldn't read yet, and teachers were like, "What's wrong with you? You can't do this." And I was freaking out. Once someone could read me the directions, I'd be fine, but I just couldn't get there. And so I started this just like ball of anxiety. I was just always really anxious about a lot of things. And then somewhere in the history of me, it was complicated because there was my mom is an ideal human being and my dad is bad, and my mom has told me all the reasons why my dad is bad, and my dad has tried to convince me that my mom is bad. My dad made it worse by eventually molesting me, and I just was a fucking hot mess. And I didn't feel safe in my home. I didn't feel safe anywhere. I ended up having to stay with my dad for most of my young adult life. Just that was the dynamic. My mom was always working, never really home. Then eventually my mom got sick with a skin disease and she was home for 2 years straight, but miserable. It was a skin disease where you could every couple of hours peel the skin off of your hand. And so our house slowly became a dead skin infestation. And so it was truly not great. It was really, really upsetting. And I had to go through my dad telling me in a car ride on the way home, "Hey, by the way, I think we should talk about what happens if your mom doesn't make it." And I'm sitting there thinking about oh my God, wait, it's possible that I could be literally stuck with you for forever. And I was terrified. And that was in 6th grade to 8th grade. That was when that skin disease happened. I felt extremely trapped. There was no way out. Remember at around 7 was when I got baptized and confirmed and had communion in the Catholic Church. And my mom decided that this was the thing for me. This was my savior. I don't know. It was a bizarre moment. And so I had this big birthday in the church, got a new middle name. I don't know. It was really confusing. I didn't really understand it. I know that I basically signed my life over to God and then drank some wine. And I remember being like, "Mom," nothing else mattered about that whole event other than the fact that I sipped wine. And I was like, "That wine was so good, Mom. I want to drink that wine more." And it was at 7 years old that I was like, that was the first drink that I ever liked. Later, I got into maybe the 9 or 10-year-old age, and I was watching, it was New Year's Day. After New Year's Eve, my mom and my sister and everybody on New Year's Eve had popped open a bottle of champagne and made some mimosas, and it was this cute little dainty event. And they gave me my first little tiny bit of a mimosa, and I was, "This is so great. I love this," on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Day, there was like this cute little Lizzie McGuire marathon happening. And I ended up spending my whole afternoon, the entire day, going back to that fridge and sneaking champagne and orange juice and just like drinking it in the dark in our living room. I don't think anyone knew, but it was fun. It was fine. Not to mention, I always like to mention that it was in a little tiny plastic Little Mermaid cup, because that's how old we are. We're not old enough to have like nice cups. We are Little Mermaid plastic cups. And I didn't think there was anything weird about that. I also didn't think there was anything weird about me always wanting to try the foam on my dad's beer or sip his beer and never liking it, but always coming back. My mom's fascination with Jack Daniels was always so interesting to me. And I was like, Mom, that stuff is disgusting. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to drink that. Yet it was a challenge. And so I spent most of my young adult life thinking about how I was terrified of alcohol because I've seen what it can do to people. I had my uncle go to jail. I had my cousin go to jail. They killed people. My brother was an addict. Every person in my family has a history with alcohol. And I was like, there's no way, that's not going to be me. I'm just going to never drink. Don't you understand? I'm just going to never drink. And it was already starting. I got to college, which was when I learned how to not be in my house, because one of my biggest goals in all of this was to never have my mom see me drunk. And so if I could just protect her from that, I was good. So I got friends in college who would let me come over to their house and sleep over and drink all the shit that I could drink, and then come home high, smelling like booze, pretending like nothing happened. In college was when I really started to learn about the picking the right friend group kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm going to go out with the people who go rock climbing. And then we go out and drink, because it's a rock climbing for 30 minutes and then like 4 hours of binge drinking. I think that's a good balance for me. And we were study partners and we were all this stuff. And every Friday was like celebration time. So we would get super wasted. I was always the most wasted. I took pride in that. Had to call my mommy to come pick me up because I couldn't drive. My poor mom had to drive 30 minutes to pick me up from wherever the fuck I was. I don't know. And then I had the gall to ask her if we could go to the bar that my friends were going to after I already was so wasted that I was like, Mom, I can't drive. Please take me to this other bar so I can drink more with people. And she was nice enough to bring me. It was really cool of her. And I was like, wow, Mom, you're awesome. It just started getting worse. And then in college was when my dad passed away. When he passed away, I remember being grateful, because I was 19 at the time, that he had passed away at an age where I couldn't drink legally. Because right after he passed, my mom and I went to a bar and we hung out and she drank. And I was like, okay, like, good, I didn't drink. I don't think I thought about it then, but when I got sober, I was like, thank God. Like, thank God I learned some, like, a little bit of coping skills. And so I went to therapy. I learned about group therapy from my dad passing. And I had gone through like 3 years of group therapy, really enjoying the process of getting to know people who had similar situations. I was kind of a godsend at the time, because all the people that I was in group therapy with were girls who lost their dads within the last year. And so we were all like super relatable. Like, we all knew things. All stories were different, but I knew that I could relate. And eventually I stopped going to group therapy. I graduated from college. I got a degree, and then I went and got my master's. And in my master's year was the year, like a month before graduation, when my mom passed away. When she passed away, I was at the wit's end of a period when I could still go back to the same therapists that I was going to, because all of those were college-based therapists, and I didn't have those resources anymore. And so as a result, I drank. Drinking became my only solution, because every night I had to come home, live in the same space. This is the place that I live now, is where I lived with my mom. And every night I would come home and I was like, it's the worst. Like, how do people come to empty households after you've lived with this person your entire life and loved them and cared for them? I was so upset when she died. I would come home and cry. I still cry about giving her a saint complex. I give her like this, she's a perfect human complex, which is not healthy for my sobriety. I would come home, and then for a while, she and I had been going to this bar, and we had befriended the bartender at this bar. For 2 years after she passed away, he and I became bestest friends. Basically, he was my boyfriend at the bar. So he would give me free food every time I went to the restaurant and free drinks. And so I was basically paying like maybe $5 when I would go, because I would get stupid, cheap little tacos and like binge on alcohol. And I was like, this is the greatest deal ever. Like, what a fantastic man. And did that for 2 years. And then he ended up moving, and I needed to start fulfilling my own alcoholism. And I realized really quickly that alcohol is expensive, and I wasn't really making a ton of money. And I was kind of overwhelmed by that. I got into a bunch of trouble with work. I was always missing work. The first day of my job, I came late to like this big meeting. It was really uncomfortable. I used to drink in the closet of my classroom. Like there were no boundaries. There was nothing that like would stop me from doing what I wanted to do. Eventually, I was waking up in the morning feeling like, what in the heck? How did I get to my bed? Like, so grateful that I made it to my bed, but wondering like, why do I have to get to a point of surprise? Like, can't we all just be waking up in our bed and be like, yes, I knew I was going to wake up here? No, I wasn't doing that kind of lifestyle. So I came home from a really wild, for me, karaoke night. Like, karaoke turned into insanity. And I got into sobriety through waking up one morning and being like, I got to take this quiz. And I took the quiz a few times, and it was like that 20 questions or whatever. And it's like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you doing this other thing? And I was like, yeah, yep, doing that. Like, don't know what's happening. I don't know why I'm here. And I remember walking into my first meeting and seeing this girl crocheting. And I was like, she's like here and also not here. And I'm like also not here. And I'm also crying, and my brain can't function, and my nose is running because I can't stop crying. And everyone just said like funny things like, hey, dude, I woke up naked on my dresser. And I was like, hey, I've done that. And it just felt like going to group therapy again, finding a bunch of people that I felt like I could relate to, realizing that I knew nothing in this program was really challenging for me, because I have a really big ego and I really think that I know a lot about everything, and I think I'm a genius. And so when I came in here and eventually relapsed at about 6 months on the day, had a really hard time getting back into sobriety, because I didn't think that I was wrong. I didn't think that I was doing anything wrong. I was like, I survived the relapse. It's going fine. And I became really unwilling to get willing again. That ended up being a huge wall for me. So it took me from October to March, when the pandemic started, for me to figure out that I just couldn't do what I was doing. It wasn't easy, and it ended up being a pretty uphill battle from March to now, because it generally got easier, because that was when I found this group. And that's when I really got into service and started seeing outside of my little bubble of AA, and started to see how AA can help bigger masses of people. This group was the first time that I was introduced to YPA. This group was the first time that I saw people doing fun things in sobriety. Like, we do games after this meeting. We hang out after the meeting. We talk bullshit after the meeting. It's a for me, this is a full-on fellowship that I don't necessarily have in my local area. I feel really grateful to have found this meeting and been coming back. So I keep coming, because I do really enjoy the connections that I make here. And I think that if I could do my sobriety all over again, my biggest thing that I would try to do more of is talking to people, because I forget that there is a whole network of people. Everyone is here with the common goal. And I like to think that my problem is not everyone's problem, and that I should just do it by myself. But I've learned through sponsorship, and I've learned through the few communications that I do have with people that it can get way easier without a whole lot of extra struggle just by asking for help. Yeah, with that, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful for the friendships that I've made here. I'm really grateful that I was asked to share. Thank you so much and have a great night.